Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. So today we are doing the Figueroa versus Fulton 2 breakdown and prediction video. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So this fight is a rematch between Brandon Figueroa and Stephen Fulton Jr., a rematch of their 2021 bout that ended in a very close majority decision victory for Stephen Fulton and a Fight of the Year candidate, as Fulton would unify the WBC and WBO Junior Featherweight Championship at 122. This fight is going to take place on the Benavidez and Morrell Amazon Prime pay-per-view undercard. It's going to serve as the co-feature, and it will be for Figueroa's 126-pound featherweight championship of the world. So this is a big one right here. Now if you haven't seen my breakdown videos before, basically, I break down the fight completely. We talk about the fight itself, what it means, what's at stake, and then we get into each fighter individually, asking the same questions on both sides. In a championship fight, we start with the champion and then move to the challenger. So let's get into it. We discussed this fight, what it means. Well, first off, it means a ton to both fighters. It's a crossroads fight for sure. You got Figueroa. This is his only pro loss was to Stephen Fulton, a fight that he thought he won, but truly believed that the weight had a lot to do with the result. That's why they never rematched at 122, because Figueroa since then has moved to 126, citing that he can't make 122 successfully anymore. You got Fulton, who's also at a crossroads. He made his debut at 126 back in September. Kind of a shaky moment, shaky fight. And now he's getting a big opportunity at a title, but it's more for Figueroa to try to avenge his only pro loss. They're both PBC guys, so it's an easy fight to make. And it's really significant for the featherweight division because it's a wide open division. I think a victory on either side is going to shoot the winner up to the very top of featherweight. You got right now Angelo Leo sitting at the top with Nick Ball. But these guys are right behind them. I mean, again, this is a wide open division. You got Rafael Espinosa as the WBO champion. A lot of guys are lobbying to take the top spot, and the winner of this fight is really going to be in a strong position to be at the top of 126, potentially unified belt. So it's a very big fight, very big rematch right here between these two guys, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be good. Now, let's get into the fighters, starting with the reigning WBC champion, Brandon Figueroa. We'll talk about him first. So Figueroa rolling into the fight. We're going to go back to his last three fights, and those date back to, July of 22, where he was 8 months removed from the loss to Stephen Fulton. He would make his debut at 126 in July of 22 when he took on Carlos Castro. And he would dominate Castro at 126, absolutely break him down, dominate him in an all-action-packed fight, and he would stop him in 6 rounds in a strong debut. But then he would take, it wasn't as long off, I think it was about 8 months off, and he would return to take on Mark Magsayo, the hard-hitting Filipino former champ. They were fighting for the WBC's interim belt. And he was able to outwork Magsayo in a very good action-packed fight, a fun fight. He was able to outwork him to a 12-round unanimous decision and become the interim champ. Then he would go on a 14-month layoff after being in line to fight Ray Vargas for the title. He would go on a 14-month layoff. Vargas would end up taking on Nick Ball instead early in 2024, and then he would return on the Canelo Munguia undercard in May of last year and would take on former 122-pound champ Jesse Magdaleno. He would break down and bust up Magdaleno, scoring a 9th-round knockout victory to retain the WBC interim championship. The WBC a couple months later would order Figueroa and Vargas to fight, finally, in a mandatory fight. But the fight never happened. We were waiting towards the end of the year. The fight was looking like it was going to take place on one of the big Amazon cards. Never came to fruition. And then I think around November area, the WBC upgraded Figueroa to champ, and ordered the fight with Stephen Fulton. And they Vargas dropped to the champion in recess. And as I said, Figueroa became the full champion. So now he heads into this fight. I think he's hungry. He just hasn't been very active. But I think he really wants to avenge this loss. He's been waiting around. This fight was talked about over the last couple of years a couple times. But just the loss that Fulton suffered against Inoue. And then the PBC just not keeping their guys very active. I think resulted in this fight, not the rematch not taking place. But Figueroa is coming into this fight. He's a world champ now, again, in a second weight class. He wants to leave no doubt. He believes he's better at 126. And I think he's ready to rock and roll and try to avenge his only pro defeat and start his campaign as world champion with a bang at 122 pounds. So this is going to be a good one for him, as he's really looking forward to it and motivated. 9-month layoff, I'm not too worried about that. He's looked solid in those fights. So I think he's going to be okay with the inactivity that he's had. He hasn't been super active. He's been fighting once every calendar year, but at about 8-9 months at a time. His biggest gap was about 14 months. This one is going to be about 9 months heading into this fight. But again, I don't think the inactivity is going to affect him too much, so we'll see. Now, what does he need to do to win this fight? What style does he need to employ to beat Stephen Fulton? And I really think he doesn't need to just kind of fall into the pocket traps that Stephen Fulton sets. I definitely put on the pressure, but I think what he needs to do is more the body attack and maybe create, separate a little and then start again, working his way top to bottom and bottom to top. But definitely not just fall into those pockets and go all out, because that's what Stephen Fulton wants. And to be honest, that's how Stephen Fulton beat him the first time. I was one of the ones that thought Fulton won the fight. It was close. It was a good battle, but Fulton was landing the better shots because Figueroa was exposing himself while he was throwing a million punches. He's exposing himself and leaving himself wide open to get hit with the better shots. So with his height and reach advantage that he has over Fulton, which I believe he's about 3 inches taller, and I think he has about a 2-inch reach advantage on Stephen Fulton. He needs to try to put the pressure on with the body attack on Stephen Fulton and see if he can try to wear him down, because this is a 12-round fight. And I think if he can do that, he will be successful in this one. Now, can Brandon Figueroa win this fight by knockout? And I think he can. He's not a huge one-punch knockout guy, and we know Fulton can take shots. But I think Figueroa, a breakdown, if he fully just invests in the body, bust up Stephen Fulton, I think he can win this fight by knockout. I do believe that. I think he is stronger at 126, and I think he can be more successful against Stephen Fulton if he does that kind of body attack. Now, can he win a decision? Their first fight was close. I do think he can outwork Stephen Fulton to a decision. But I think if it goes to the scorecards, it's going to be close on either side. I really do believe that. So what is more likely, a knockout or a decision? Honestly, I think maybe slightly more that this fight goes to the cards. But I think for Figueroa, I think it's more it may be slightly more likely a decision, but I can see him winning this fight by knockout. So I think it's kind of like a 51-49 to 55-45 type difference in terms of percentage for knockout to decision. So we'll see. Now, what does the victory mean for Brandon Figueroa? I honestly think a strong win, especially a convincing win, chalks up as the biggest win of his career, because he would avenge his only pro defeat, and he really would solidify himself here in the featherweight division as a world champion. So I really do believe it's the biggest win of his career. Now, what does a loss mean for Brandon Figueroa? A loss really hurts him in this fight. This is a fight he can't afford to lose. It's no shame losing to Stephen Fulton, but Figueroa is full on in belief that it was the weight that hurt him in the first fight. That's why he didn't do the rematch. And he really is trying to take over 126 and present himself as the top dog. And a loss would really push him back. It would really hurt him. Now, let's go to the challenger, the former unified junior featherweight champion, Stephen Fulton Jr., and break him down as we start with his last 3 fights. They date back to June of 2022, and just like Brandon Figueroa, he was coming off. He was 7 months removed from the victory over Brandon Figueroa, where he unified the 2 world titles in that fight of the year candidate that he had with him. That fight was against Daniel Roman, the former unified champ, where Stephen Fulton completely solidified himself as the top dog at 122 when he scored a dominant decision win over the former champ Daniel Roman. Roman ended up retiring after the fight. It was so one-sided, and Fulton pushed forward. But then he took 13 months off as he was trying to lock down the big showdown against the undisputed undisputed bantamweight champion, Naoya Inoue, the Monster. They were good to go a couple times, but then the fight kept getting canceled, or got canceled once or twice, I believe. And then finally in July of 2023, the big fight would happen, and it was coming in as a 50-50 fight. There was a lot of people, myself included, that thought Stephen Fulton had the style that was really going to complicate things for the Monster Inoue, but Inoue dominated Stephen Fulton Jr. Stephen Fulton did not know it hit him. It was like a fucking freight train hit him with the Monster. Monster picked him apart, dominated him, broke him down, and scored an explosive 8th round TKO victory as he became the unified champion, handing Stephen Fulton his first loss. It was a devastating loss for Stephen Fulton Jr. After the fight, there really wasn't a ton of talk out of his camp about what he was going to do next. A lot of people believed he was moving to 126, and that's what he ended up doing, but it was after a 14-month layoff. Finally, in September of last year on the Canelo undercard, he would return and take on Carlos Castro, and would have a much tougher time than he was anticipating, as Castro hit him with some good shots, even knocked Fulton down. And but Fulton rallied in the late rounds, fought his ass off, fought hard, and was able to secure a close but controversial 10-round split decision win as he was successful in his debut at 126. So rolling into this fight, I mean, I think Stephen Fulton is confident and hungry, and knows and believes in himself that he can win, but he has been shaky. He has been shaky the last 2 fights, and we're gonna see if the loss to Inoue, and if he potentially was just overlooking Carlos Castro, or if he's lost a step since that loss to Inoue. So we are really gonna see what it is, because I'm not sure the confidence is as high as it once was, and I think Figueroa might be catching him at the right moment. So we'll see. Now, what does Stephen Fulton Jr. need to do to win this fight over Brandon Figueroa? And the first things first, he needs to be in ridiculous shape. He needs to be ready to go 12 hard rounds again. He needs to be ready to counterpunch. He needs to really look at the film from the last fight and know that the pockets is where it is. Stand in the pocket and allow Figueroa to get inside of Figueroa as Figueroa is coming in, and hit him with some big shots. The eye-opening, eye-catching, dominant shots that he can hit him with, that will, sway the judges. That's what he needs to do to win the fight. Now, that's what I believe he needs to do to win and score another decision. Now, can Stephen Fulton Jr. win this fight by knockout? I don't think so. I don't think he's a powerful guy. Really in general, I think he's more of a counterpunching boxer. I think Brandon Figueroa's got a great chin. He always has. And I don't see Stephen Fulton winning this fight by knockout. Now, can Stephen Fulton Jr. win a decision? Well, he already did once. And I do believe he can win a decision, but I believe these guys in a decision type bout, it's going to be close no matter what, in my opinion. But I do believe he can win because he already did. Now, what does a win mean for Stephen Fulton Jr.? Well, not only would it leave no doubt that he's the better man, even slightly over Brandon Figueroa. But it would make him a two division champ, and it really would kind of, not necessarily erase the fight with anyway, but it would kind of make you go, you know what, he really is a good fighter anyways, just a great special fighter, and I think that would sway him, that would get him back into good standing, and he'd be able to start a good run in the featherweight division. So a win means a lot for his career right here, especially at 30 years old. When they fought the first time, he was 27, now he's 30. So a victory here would be big for him at this age, because he's really, could kind of tail end of his prime, going into his latter years here, into the early 30s, to where he can start a good, solid, hard run at 126. Now, what does a loss mean for Stephen Fulton? Depending on how he loses, it could be devastating, or it could be, just kind of like, so what, you lost to a great fighter. So, again, it really is depending on how he loses. If he gets his ass whipped in this fight, he gets knocked out, loses a one-sided fight, he's going to really have to go back to the drawing board and see, how dedicated, how much he wants it, how bad he wants it, and where and when he's going to make his return. But if he loses a close fight, a close decision, in a good one, maybe the third fight there's a possibility of a third fight, or he can jump back in there against another good, solid fighter to try to get back into the mix later in the year, So it really depends on how he loses. But either way, a loss is going to hurt. So now that at the end of the video, well, first off, is it more likely that Fulton wins a decision over Figueroa or a knockout? And obviously, I think a decision is way more likely for Fulton. I really don't think he can knock out Brandon Figueroa, but you never know. So now, finally, is it better for boxing if Brandon Figueroa wins the rematch here, or if Stephen Fulton repeats? I really believe it's better for boxing if Brandon Figueroa wins. His style is more attractive, more exciting, and I think it would build towards a third fight, especially if it's close. Or, because of the more attractive style, it makes Figueroa, it avenges his only pro loss, and he gets right back up on the horse and is ready to, take over. And I think a lot more people would be into a Figueroa run with the WBC belt at 126 over a Stephen Fulton one. But wouldn't be bad for boxing if Fulton wins, because Fulton is a pretty legitimate fighter, and he is somewhat entertaining, just not as entertaining as Brandon Figueroa is. So now, what is my prediction on this WBC featherweight title fight, this rematch between these two rivals? And not an easy fight to judge, but I'm confident, if that makes sense. I was confident when the fight was first announced. Their first fight was very close. It was a good battle. I did feel Fulton won the fight. But I also do believe Brandon Figueroa about the weight. I do think the weight played a difference. Figueroa was a very big fighter at 122. And I was always looking forward to the move to 126. And, I believe now that they're a couple years older, they've learned from the first fight. I believe Figueroa knows what he needs to do to win this fight. I think he's not struggling with weight anymore. Figueroa, you could tell he was waiting for his right moment to get this rematch, and it was at 126. Even when Fulton beat him, Figueroa was pissed. He thought he won, but he said he wanted the rematch at 126, and Fulton was like, well, no, I'm the champ. I'm staying here. If you want a rematch, we rematch here. Figueroa is a passionate guy that thought he won the first fight. If he really believed that the weight wasn't an issue, I think he would have returned to 122 and fought Fulton, because I really think it burned his ass that he lost. He didn't do that. Obviously, the weight was a big deal for him, and I think he's going to overwhelm Fulton. And I also believe on Fulton's side, this is not the same Stephen Fulton. I believe he's questioning I think there's a question in his confidence. I believe with Figueroa being bigger and more comfortable with the weight, and also with his confidence not being what it was for Stephen Fulton, I think that's going to be the edge that Figueroa needs. So This fight, I think it's a good one. I think it can go the distance, and I absolutely believe Stephen Fulton can win again. But my final prediction is I'm picking Brandon Figueroa to win this fight by a TKO in the late rounds. I think it could happen anywhere between rounds 9 and 12. I just think he's going to wear down Stephen Fulton. I think he's going to beat him to the punch this time, and I think he's going to win. But Stephen Fulton, I thought he won the first fight. I will say that again. I do believe he can win the rematch fighting the same style in the same way, but he's got to fight the perfect fight. So it's going to be a good one. Saturday, February 1st, Amazon Prime pay-per-view. This is the co-feature, the co-main event of the David Benavidez and David Morrell super fight at light heavyweight right there. So can't wait to see it. Rematch for the WBC featherweight title. This is the Figueroa versus Fulton 2 breakdown and prediction video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.